Hey friends, welcome to episode 207 of the Fierce Calling podcast. I'm Doris Swift and I want to warmly welcome you here today. Thank you for listening in. This week I have a wonderful guest and a fantastic episode that is going to encourage, inspire, and challenge you. My guest this week is Robin Gerblick. She is an amazing woman of God. She's an award-winning author, and congratulations to Robin. She just recently received 2 special Selah Awards, one for memoir, first place in memoir, and also the 2025 Book of the Year for nonfiction, and that is fantastic. And you are going to hear all about the book that she wrote, Giving Up Grace, a Spiritual Rebranding of the Soul, but so much more. She's going to share her real, raw, and redeemed story from brokenness to purpose, and she is going to also share how she now encourages other women to encounter God, and especially through her transformative Exodus women's retreats. So we're going to talk all about that. And friend, I know what Robin shares is going to encourage, inspire, and challenge you, so listen in while I have a chat with Robin Gerblick. What is threatening to steal your joy? What is it that feels so heavy right now that you could barely stand? God has a plan, and His plan is to surrender it. Surrender it to Him. It might be a prodigal. It might be a relationship, a marriage, something with your job. So many things. We have so many amazing blessings, but there are so many things in our life that threaten to steal our joy. I'm Doris Swift, author of the award-winning 6-week Bible study, Surrender the Joy Stealers, Rediscover the Jesus Joy in You. And it helps women rediscover the overflowing, ever-present Jesus joy within that fills, empowers, and ripens the fruit that God produces in our lives. Using personal and biblical stories, I share how you can identify your joy stealers, surrender them to God, reawaken the joy within, and share the joy with others. You can do it on your own or with a group. Check it out, friends. Surrender the Joy Stealers. Rediscover the Jesus joy in you. It's available on all the online retailers. It's time to take your joy back. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm excited to introduce to you my friend Robin Gerblick. She is an award-winning author. She's a biblical life coach, a certified personal trainer, and Pilates instructor. Hello, I'm impressed with that. I need more of that in my life. And I just love that she's a lover of life in the living water. That's amazing. And she has so many things going on, wonderful ministry work that she does. She has a retreat, the Exodus Women's Retreat, and we're also going to talk about her book, Giving Up Grace, a Spiritual Rebranding of the Soul. And you're going to want to hear all about that. And I would love if you would share a little bit more about yourself, Robin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Doris. I've been looking forward to this. We've had a few schedule changes, and I'm excited to be here. So thanks.
Thank you. And so you are married to your best friend, which I love, and you go between a couple of different states. We were talking earlier, Arizona and Idaho.
Right.
So those of you who are listening, I know I have some listeners in those states. So Robin, I would love if you would share a little bit about your story, however the Lord leads you, and how you're taking action where your passion, compassion, and conviction intersect.
Yeah, that's perfect. As we were talking about earlier, I just love that, because that's how God uses us and He calls us. And I love the scripture that you use in your notes. I'm going to remind myself, but I think it's the Ephesians 3:20. And I just love that, because God is able to do so much more than we could ever possibly imagine, and all the glory to Him. But what I really love is it's never too late to use your story. You know, God can always use it. And I think for me, I always felt like I was late to the party. I'm a lot older than people think, and I just think it took me so long to. Well, it took me a really long time to find Jesus, number one, and then to find healing for my abortion journey that I had, my inability to have children because of that. It just took so long that I felt like, God, are you ever gonna once I found Jesus, I'm like, are you ever gonna use me? It's like it just seemed to go on forever. But yeah, my story
Mm.
is hard, and I have these three words that describe it. So it's real, raw, and redeemed. And
Mm.
I know my life was just so upside down and hard when I was younger, but that started with an abortion when I was 19. And I truly thought I was going to marry that guy and have, the family and the white picket fence, the station wagon, the 2.5 children, but that it didn't play out that way at all. He didn't want anything to do with me, and so that sort of started my what I called my 40-year wandering in the desert, like the Israelites, searching for manna and living water and anything really that would fill the spot that Jesus was meant to fill. But when you don't know Jesus, you can go in a lot of different directions, which is what I did. And I want to say I don't have any regrets because God does use every bit of our story for his good and his glory. And if I had it to do over again, I, well, there are certain things that I definitely would do differently, but what he's given me now on the end of the redemption side is just so amazing. And I think that's where our passion and compassion and conviction collide.
Yeah. So true. And I love your words, real, raw, redeemed. It's just something that is a powerful statement, and I know that a lot of us can really relate to that. And how you talked about a 40-year wandering.
Mm.
So things started to really spiral in your life when you were 19 then, and things didn't look quite the way you thought they were going to look, which oftentimes in our life things happen and it's not what we would have planned, and we might say, this is not my story, God. What
Yeah.
is this all about? But what was the circumstance at the time when you found yourself pregnant, and was it something that others in your life were encouraging you to do, or how was it back then as a 19-year-old girl?
Yeah, and back then, when we're talking, was like 1973. So that
Mm.
was just when, Roe v. Wade was coming on the scene. And I was also on birth control when I got pregnant, which is a big misconception that a lot of people have, and that the abortion industry would love to, have you think otherwise. But really, there's quite a few women that do get pregnant on birth control. So you think you're doing the
Mm.
right thing, and really you're not. And I didn't. Everyone, including my parents, wanted abortion for me. I didn't know what I wanted because I was too young, too immature. I was just scared. I was really scared. I just saw I was in just started college. I saw everything going away, all the dreams, all the goals, everything. And again, I didn't know Jesus, so there was a huge component missing in all the decision making, and really what my heart would have wanted. And it's funny because now I call myself, this will bug you, but I call myself pro-choice because, always have to say because, right? But because women do have a choice. We can choose to
Mm.
have our babies, or we can choose to give them up for adoption. And so my regret
Yeah.
would be that I didn't have my baby and give it up for adoption, because today I would know my child. And so,
Mhm.
that is a choice. So women that think, that they don't have a choice, they really do. And so I had no counseling. There was no well, let's just say there was no compassion, right?
Mhm.
There was no
Yeah.
compassion for anything that I was going through. It was just like, you're gonna do this. This is the way it's going, and that's it. And that really was it.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
excuse me, did start my 40 years of wandering. And that led really of women in my generation that we were sort of the free love generation growing up anyway. So it led to a lot of failed relationships with men, failed marriages,
Mhm.
where I felt like sex equated to love and love equated to sex. They were one and the same. And of course, now today we know they're not, right? But
Mhm.
but
Right.
back then, it was all I could think about. If a man paid attention to me and wanted to have sex with me, then okay, that's good for me, right? That means he must love me, not understanding the love of my heavenly Father, and how
Mhm.
he loves me as his daughter. That didn't come into the equation back then.
Yeah. And because at that time, because you didn't know Jesus and you didn't really know everything that was true really about you, who you
Right.
really were, your true identity, you didn't really know that at the time. And so, yeah, equating sex to love and just to feel wanted by someone, wanted
Yes.
in that way, wanted it all, and to just walk the path that just continually brought the destruction of where that was taking you. So when you found Jesus, like what was going on in your life right before you met him?
Mm,
Because usually there's something interesting right before we meet Jesus in our life. So what was going on in your life, Robin, when that was
yeah.
almost, when you made that decision?
That's so true. And it really was a divine appointment with God, because I was in a place of sheer desperation, really. And my grandmother, talk
Mm-hmm.
about an event. Yes, my grandmother had just passed away. And at the time I was dating a guy who great guy, but he had custody of his 4 children. And so me wanting children and not being able to have children, I thought, oh, this is the perfect relationship. But as I was realizing, I can't have a perfect relationship until I have a relationship with Jesus first, which is the direction he
Mm-hmm.
was leading me. But I just hadn't recognized it yet. So I had all this stuff, going on in my head and in my heart. And I took a walk down below where I lived, and we have a beautiful, like, stream or river down there, and I just sat on a rock, and I cried out to God, literally. Um, I I just said, I can't do it. I can't do life like this anymore. It's just not working for me, and I need help. I need help." So I was crying out to the God that I didn't know, not knowing
Mm.
that he would answer me. And he did.
Wow.
And he answered it. Well, I did. He gave me this lightning bolt experience that was, in our culture, we believe that seeing is believing. But that day on the river, I found out that believing is truly seeing, because he gave me
Mm.
all five senses in the sensory experience that was supernatural, where I could
Mhm.
see my life laid in front of me. And I could see the man that I was with and his 4 children, and God was very, very clear, this is not the one. I'm the one. I'm the one.
Mm.
And until you figure that out, there's not going to be the one, it's going to be me. And so
Wow. Yeah.
it was a huge thing. I mean, I ran back up the hill to my house. I called that guy, and I said, "You're a great guy. I love you. You're a great friend. I love your children, but I can't be with you. I mean, like it ended that quickly. And probably within, like a few weeks, God brought me my best friend, the man I'm married to now of 32 years this year. And, God, he
Nice.
had this all planned out ahead of time. And all I needed to do was receive. I needed to receive
Yeah.
his grace. But there's if you don't mind, this might go a little off where we're talking right now, but the reason that the book is called what it is really because it all came back to that moment on the river. And God, talk about passion and conviction and all of that, but God gave me the whole vision of the book 10 years before I ever actually published it. But the name Giving Up Grace, people, they ask about that a lot because they're like, what do you mean
Mhm.
giving up grace? Why would you give up, God? They just assume God's grace, and it is part of God's
Yeah.
grace. But I said, well, sometimes you need to be lost in order to be found. And sometimes you need to give up the grace that you don't know in order to get the grace that you really need. And in my case, I gave up my unborn daughter, Grace, in order to receive God's grace. That was how
Mm.
he had it planned all along.
Mhm.
And the spiritual rebranding of the soul came, it didn't, I can say it didn't come exactly that day because my now husband and I found Jesus together, our relationship with Jesus. Jesus came into my
Mhm.
life that day. But what happens during that is a spiritual rebranding is what happens to us when we find Jesus. We all of a sudden are a new creation. The old things have passed and the new is here. And that's what he did to me. He just rebranded my soul, and I'm a new creation in Christ. And then it's like once all of that came to be, then my now husband and I, it was just such a beautiful, just a divine moment.
Wow. That there is so much to unpack right there, with all that you had just shared. It's amazing. And I love how you said believing is seeing,
Mm,
because that makes so much sense. And just the things, how kind of God just put on your heart that the person you weren't with wasn't the right person, for you to marry. That wasn't the one you were meant to be with. And so when we seek the Lord first, we can trust that we're not going to miss what he has for us.
mm,
Like if we try to do things on our own and we don't go to him, or maybe we might not know him yet, and maybe someone who's listening right now is listening because there was something in your story they needed to hear. And I love the fact that this happened in front, like sitting by a
mm.
river. What a beautiful place, when we're outside and we just can see all the beautiful things that God created. So we can't deny there is a creator because of all the beautiful creations, and you're out there and you're by the water. It didn't have to happen in some like conference or church service. It was something personal between you and the Lord,
Wow.
and that you were humble to ask for help. And really, that's all it takes, for us to just say, Lord, I need you. And it's like, he's probably like, well, it's about time, you realized. but you believed there was a God, right? So
Mm.
you knew, I mean, you weren't sure who you were talking to, but you always had believed there was a God. Or how were you kind of brought up? Was that something that you had always believed?
Right. No, it wasn't. So
Oh.
I did not grow up in a Christian home. My parents were
Mhm.
wonderful. I had, just a great childhood, but we didn't go to church. We were called the CEOs, Christmas and Easter only. And
Mm-hmm.
so that
Yeah.
was my,
Or the Creasters.
yeah, there we go. But yeah, that was um, my introduction, I guess, to religion. And when I was in junior high, I did attend youth group for a while. But what I saw there, and I don't know, this was just my young perception of it, but it seemed so hypocritical at the time, where I'd see people
Mm,
that were being Christ-like during on Sunday, let's say, but then during the week they were completely different and not living what they said they were living on Sunday. And so I don't know, I had a lot of disillusionment there. So I quit
mm,
going, but I always believed that there was a God, and in the book I talk a lot about that, about growing up and how God was present during all stages of my life. It's just that I didn't recognize it. He has so
mm,
many characteristics of his grace that manifested themselves throughout my life. And my eyes weren't open until the day on the river. And then there were so many incredible supernatural events that God just, like, you are going to know that I am who I say I am, right?
mm,
I'm going to
mm.
show you.
Yeah. And you asked, you were
Yeah.
like, please, Lord, help me.
Yeah.
And you, like you said, you were at a point of desperation. And sometimes that's what it takes to be at that point and to experience that very warm, loving, powerful presence of God. Because there's so many that might go through life just kind of complacent,
Hmm.
even believing, knowing Jesus, believing Jesus, but never having like some kind of experience like that. And, sometimes it just takes being at the lowest parts of the valley, in
Yeah.
the pit, basically, to see, that God is there. And like you said, believing is seeing. And so because you were talking a lot about what happened after you had your abortion. So then when did you find out that this caused a physical issue with you not being able to have children? That was the cause of that?
Hmm. Yes, and unfortunately, in the abortion that I had when I was 19, while it was my first, it wasn't the last. And
Mm,
so I have been married 3 times before with my now
mm,
husband. And so during those relationships, even though they were not good, I call them, there were so many spiritual red flags. But again, prior to that, I didn't know Jesus. And so all of these things came up, but in my heart I still wanted to have children. And so as my
mm,
life progressed with these relationships, in going through infertility treatments and things like that, come to find out that there was just too much damage from the abortion, which is another kind of a lie that we hear from the abortion industry, is that, they'll say, oh, yeah, you can have multiple abortions and still get pregnant, which is true.
mm,
But they're not
mm,
telling you the other part, is that there are serious consequences, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of that take place, and may not take place right away afterwards,
yeah.
but as you live out your life and you start feeling the emptiness or the bitterness spirit or spirit of offense or spirit of unforgiveness arising in yourself, you
Mm,
have to ask yourself, what is it that's manifesting in my life that's causing all of this? So
mm.
I went through all of that, but through that I found out that I couldn't have children. There was just too much damage done.
Yeah, and as you were talking, because I was thinking back, I volunteered several years at a faith-based pregnancy center, a crisis pregnancy center, where, and it's still a ministry that I support today, and women can come in and get a free pregnancy test, and and there were a lot, and still are, of course, women who come in abortion minded, and not really understanding or knowing all the facts and all the information that they really
Yeah.
need in order to make, an informed decision about that. And if you go to Planned Parenthood or something, they're not going to tell you that side of the story at all.
Right.
And so, and we did have also, and it's still, the pregnancy centers do have the abortion recovery, because statistically, if you're in a room with, I don't know, so many women, I think it's 1 out of every 4. It might be 1 out of every 3 or 2 now that have experienced that in their life. And to be able to go forward with the healing, and to know that they can be forgiven and set free. And part of that program at the end is to name your child. And you talk about your baby girl, Grace, right?
Yeah.
Tell us how you came up with, how did that happen with naming her?
Yeah, that was it's such a good story. This is, fast forward, years later, because I'm now married to my wonderful husband, Jim, and I was speaking for a women's group in Portland, Oregon, and there was the director of the Crisis Pregnancy Center was in the audience, and she asked if I'd like to come back to her. They had just redone or redecorated, and I said, "Oh, sure, yeah, I'll love to come, love to see it." So I walk in the door, and on the wall, there's this chart of baby fetuses and all their stages of development. And I just lost it because I'd never seen that before, because nobody ever gave me any counseling. I never got, I mean, oh, it just, I literally just lost it in her office and started crying uncontrollably. And she came and put her arms around me and said, "Honey, have you not ever addressed your abortion and the grief and the trauma, because it is trauma, and we have a certain amount of PTSD that follows that people may or may not acknowledge, but I hadn't acknowledged it until that moment." And she took me in her office, took me under her wing. We were there for over 2 hours, and she counseled me and walked me through the different stages that we go through, from like, first of all, do I even need healing, to relief? Oh, great, I got it done. Now I don't have to worry about it. I can get on with my life. To denial. Oh, really wasn't a baby. It was just a clump of cells. To the anger, to the bitterness, to the forgiveness, all the stages. And so she's the one that suggested, she goes, "Well, have you named your child, your unborn child?" And I said, "No, that would have never occurred to me." But that day, that then and there, I named her Grace, because really no other name would do. And
Beautiful.
and then beyond that, when I left, when I at the time I thought, ooh, it was kind of creepy in a way, but she gave me a baby fetus doll of 10 weeks, because that was how far along I was when I aborted the first time. And the first time was so different than the second time. Um, but she gave me this little doll, and for years I didn't know what to do with the little doll. However, once that healing process started, I took Grace, and I have this beautiful, beautiful box that she's in, and she lies on a bed of cotton, and she's surrounded by all the things that would have saved her life and would have saved my life had I known. There's my mother's cross, my grandmother's cross, letters that I have written to her. Um, there's a rock in there, that, heart-shaped rock that has her name, Grace, on it. Just all of these things that, like I said, that would have saved her life and would have saved my life. But interestingly enough, last year, I just started taking Grace with me on speaking engagements. And I want,
Yeah.
yeah, I want people to see the evidence of a redeemed life, and that there's hope, no matter what you've gone through. And I love, if I can find it, um, there's a quote that I just love, and I've come across this fairly recently, but it's so perfect for this. But it's by author Timothy Keller, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. But he says the idea that there is nothing in the human experience that God himself has not suffered, even losing a child. I mean, when you think about,
Yeah.
like all the things that we've gone through, and abortion obviously is just one, one teeny thing. But when we
Mm-hmm.
realize that God and Jesus have walked through, there isn't anything they haven't walked through that we walk through or potentially walk
Yeah.
through. And how
Yes.
how beautiful and sustaining is that for us, for our hope, our hope in
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, and for understanding his grace. That's his
Yeah.
grace. He showered
Beautiful.
me with his grace, which is why I had to write
Beautiful.
a book, talk about conviction. He said, "You're going to write your
Yes.
story." Well, I don't really want to write my story. Well, guess what? You're going to be obedient.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to write your story. And now my life is like an open book. It is an open book. So,
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. How, the picture in our minds of being showered grace upon grace and then writing that book to give him glory and share your
yes.
story because it's when the time is right and when God calls us to share our story, it's vulnerable, for people to do that. But when we see and we know that the word tells us that we can encourage others and comfort others through things because we have been through them and comforted by the comforter. And someone recently had said, I think it was Abby McDonald, we were talking, and you need comfort because you've gone through something. So
Mm.
if you don't go through anything, which life, of course, Jesus said in this world we would have trouble to take heart. He's overcome the world. But if we didn't have a need for a comforter, we would never be comforted and know what that means. And then to be able to use our story of where we've been to comfort others and bring that hope to
Mhm.
others, which is what you're doing with your ministry.
Mm.
And you have this retreat. And so how did that come about?
Mm. Yeah, and that's totally a God thing too. And um, back when I used to be a competitive bicycle rider, a long distance
Mm-hmm.
bicycle rider, and I went to a bike racing camp in Napa Valley in the hopes of getting a job with this woman that put on these bike racing retreats, camps, whatever. And that was the reason that I went there. And one of the one of the exercises that we did there was finding your heart's desire. And
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, I have to backtrack on that. We had the first day of riding. It was record heat in Napa Valley, and it was like 105. And our first ride was up this ridiculous hill climbing, like right out of the gate. And I just bonked. I mean, literally, I bonked. I had to have the support van come and get me. I had heat stroke. It was terrible. It was terrible. So I never got to do any more riding on the 5-day retreat. But I did go and do her exercise of the heart's desire, which I found was um kind of a little bit of hocus pocus. It wasn't
Mm.
my belief system. It was more of a
Mm-hmm.
universal and kind of
Oh, kind of like new age type thing,
kind of,
maybe
yeah,
a
like
little.
new agey thing. And
Mm-hmm.
and I just thought, okay, well, I can ignore that part. I can still try to figure out what my heart's desire is. And through the exercise, I found that my heart's desire was leading women to Christ in a wilderness place, just like the Israelites were in the desert. And so during that exercise, she came up to me and she says, Robin, she said, I I don't really see you as a fit for our company. She said, but what I do see is you starting your own retreat organization and leading women, as you see God leading you. And and she said, "But you should go home and make a vision board and, however you do it, pray to your God." And so I'm like, that's a great idea. So I did, and God just showed up big time. And again, he gave me the name and he said, "You need to call it Exodus." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so, I thought that's a great name. Second book of the Bible. Okay, I'll take it. And so that started. And in this year, we celebrate our 20th year of Exodus Women's Retreats.
Wow.
20 years.
That's awesome.
And it's
20 years.
Mhm. Yeah, it started out, very, very slow. And I have to say I was, discouraged in the beginning. We weren't associated with any church. We were just associated with Jesus. And I thought, oh, this will be a piece of cake. I'll just go and talk to women's ministry directors. They'll love it and they'll sign their girls up. Well, that didn't happen because they didn't know me from Adam, and they didn't know what my spiritual beliefs and convictions were. And it took me a few years to understand that. And then once we got a website and started going online and people could find us, it really, really took off to where it's just incredible now. And we keep asking ourselves, like when are we gonna retire? Because I still have some of the same team members that I started with 20 years ago, but God's not done with us yet. And I'm telling you, my team, talk about, passion and the whole conviction thing. And it like the first year that we did the retreat, we were super small and nothing like how it is right now. But the second year of the retreat, I heard God say loud and clear, right? He said, "How do you expect to be the leader of Exodus if you've never read the book of Exodus?" Oh, hmm, yeah, that was like when, like I said, when he shows up, he can show up
Yeah.
really big. But it was like he was sitting right next to me and saying, how do you expect to lead when you don't really know the story of Exodus? So I took a year off and I studied the book of Exodus. And then I
Wow.
realized, you know, why God gave me the name for it, because it's our spiritual journey into our wilderness seasons, and everybody
Yeah.
has them, right? And so what better way to get out of your wilderness season is to be in a physical, beautiful wilderness. So the retreats, they're always done. We always do them on water, some kind of water. Sometimes we have to count a pool as water, but most of the time we're in very remote places that are hard to get to because what the Israelites went through wasn't easy.
Yeah.
There are 40 years
Yeah.
of
Wilderness.
wandering, but what Moses did was to get away. He he went out into the wilderness. He spent 3 days in the wilderness seeking God and seeking God's face. And so that's what we do. It's just so cool.
Wow. That is so beautiful. And I love that you took that year off to study Exodus, how God directed you to it, because it's like once you went through that book and you really, really like immersed yourself in that, it would seem would bring so much more meaning to what you were doing, and how it all connected and related and how God gave that to you in the first place. So, wow, that is really fascinating. I'm so glad that we talked about that. And I would love, Robin, if you would share, maybe if you have a last encouraging thing you want to share with who is listening today, because we might have, someone who is listening that is struggling right now, maybe they are post abortive and just,
Mm.
things are manifesting in their life, things are happening. Because oftentimes I'm going through even counseling, because I do lay counseling and all, just there are so many things that happen in a woman's life and she may not realize, because I think you kind of alluded to that too. You may not realize that it's connected to something in your past, which could have been maybe an experience with abortion or just, the wilderness as it is. Like you said, there's seasons of wilderness that people go through. And so if you could just share a word of encouragement right
Mhm.
now, maybe one step forward that they can take, and then how the listener can connect with you and find out all about your book, your ministry, your coaching, and this amazing retreat.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity too. But I think the biggest component of all of that is finding forgiveness. Like we can't really move forward until we find forgiveness. And when if you know Jesus, then you know that you're forgiven by him, but there's also the component of forgiving ourselves. And so many people, you know, hide under the guilt and shame that, oh, I'm just not good enough. I'm not enough. I hear that all the time. I'm
Mhm.
just not enough. Why would Jesus? Why? I mean, maybe he can forgive me, but I've done so many, horrible things, whatever it is. But there's another one of my favorite quotes is by author Adam Ramsey, and it says Jesus is not disillusioned with you because he never had any illusions about who you were in the first place. He
Wow, right.
Right? Like he
Yeah.
created you before you were even born. He saw you in your mother's womb. He gets it. He knows you. He knows your heart. And when I read that, I was like, "Oh, yeah. Well, why am I putting if Jesus isn't putting that kind of thing on me, why am I putting it on myself?" So, I think whatever it takes for somebody to walk through the healing of forgiveness, and I'm sure you've heard the thing is like unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting,
Mhm.
the other person to die, but you're the one drinking the poison. You're the one that's poisoning yourself. And
Yeah.
so, I went through, and that may be something for another time, but my whole forgiveness journey is huge. But I think women need to know that back when I had my abortion, there were not the resources out there today that are available today. And there's so
Mhm.
many things, even our church, does which I'm actually leading right now, a post-abortive trauma healing class. And so
Mm.
I think church is a great place to start. There's a whole Christian counseling network out there where you can find Christian counselors that deal with all kinds of wilderness experiences. And then just
Yes.
seeking God's word, because his word is the ultimate, the ultimate saving piece of our life, and it allows us to understand the character and the nature of God through his grace and his word.
Amen. Thank you. That is so encouraging. And I'm sure that someone listening right now really needed to hear that
Mm,
today. And I would love, Robin, if you could share with the listener how they can connect with you,
yeah.
maybe any resources that you have that you'd love to share about.
Yeah, I think if they just go to my website, which is easy, it's just robingerblick.com. And on the website, the book is there. There's a link that goes to our Exodus Women's Retreat page. There's also a resources page for different organizations that I feature like each month. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping kind of thing. So that's probably the best way to connect. And if you need prayer, you can just drop me a note and I'll be happy to pray for you or whatever your situation is.
That's amazing. And I'll put that in the show notes so the listener can find you. And like you said, it's easy, just your name, Robin Gerblick.
Yeah.
And it's easy to, it's spelled just how it sounds. So that's easy. And I really enjoyed our conversation today. It was so great to have you on. And I would love to have you back on sometime, because I think there are some things that we could really continue to talk about. And that would be really great. Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Doris, for the opportunity. It was my pleasure. I loved it.
Thank you. And thank you, friends, for listening today. And I hope you'll join me next time when I talk with another woman who's taking action where her passion, compassion, and conviction intersect. Until then, friends, have a blessed week, and I'll talk to you soon.